At Loc-Doc Security, our mission is to help you protect your people and your property. And today, we're going to be answering a question of why is my door not latching? This is something that we get a lot of calls for. My door's not closing, my door's not latching. So we're going to be diving into that today. This is Eric. How are you doing, Eric?
Hey, doing well. How are you, Chad?
Fantastic, man. Good. Fantastic. So let's jump into it. When you say latching, first of all, to kind of set the tone, what does that mean?
So basically, latching can be defined as the mechanism inside the door is latching in the door frame, positively securing the door.
So a lot of times people will interchange closing or locking or latching. They all are kind of saying the same thing, but
exactly.
The latching process is actually it closing and connecting to something so that it can't be pulled open.
Right.
All right, very cool. So why would someone's door not latch?
So one of the most common issues we see with the door not latching is because the door is either swelling because of the heat. That's something that we encounter a lot as the temperatures start to rise as they are right now.
Naturally.
So another thing that it could be is the door is sagging. Okay. So over time, a door with pivots or hinges can kind of deteriorate over time. Those are basically disposable parts that can need replacement after a while. And as those parts deteriorate, it can cause the door to sag. And then as the door starts to shut, it'll actually catch on the frame and stop the door from latching.
So a typical pivot or a hinge, without getting overly in depth with the technicalities, which I know you've got a lot of that information, but they're basically just parts that are wearing on each other.
Exactly.
And over time they break down, and because of them breaking down, then the door starts to change its position.
Exactly.
Okay. And that's something that can happen over a few years, or it can happen over a large number of years. And a lot of people ask, I think, in conjunction with something like this, how frequently do I need to be making these adjustments? And what have your take been on that? How frequently is that need to be adjusted?
So it all depends on usage. That's the main thing. So if it's the front entrance to your building and you have 85 customers in and out in a 1 hour period, obviously that door is going to be under heavy use. And another thing is if it's protected from the weather, it can generally have a little bit of a longer life cycle as opposed to if it's out in the elements, in the sun, in the snow, wind, rain, sleet.
Yeah, just like anything is once it gets wet and then heat, it's just constant beating on the door. And I think the traffic thing is really something to keep in mind, where you may have a side entrance to a building or maybe a door that's infrequently used, and obviously that's not going to need as much attention.
Sure.
But the main entrance to that building that's constantly getting open, probably leaned open, pushed, held open, all of those factors are going to play into it.
Exactly.
All right, so if that's a situation where my door's it's coming to a close, but maybe it's not actually sticking or latching or locking, what is something that can help with that?
Sure. So one of the most common fixes that we run into for this that we actually offer is called a continuous hinge.
Okay.
And actually I've got one right here. This is a miniature version, so a continuous hinge for a cat door. Basically, most continuous hinges are about 7 to 8 feet in height, whatever the height of the door is.
So it matches the exact same height as the door?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep, it's going to be exactly the same height as the door. Basically, you're looking at the back side of it right now. So this is the side that would be on the door, and this is the side that would be on the door frame. So it's going to go basically on the surface. This is called a full surface. And you can see here as it rotates, as that door opens, it's going to go to, those gears are going to interlock in each other and it's going to open. So what that does is it allows, instead of 3 hinges, basically supporting the weight of that door, it spreads out the weight of the door over the entire length of the door.
So it's distributing the weight a little more equally. A lot of people would refer to these as a piano hinge.
Exactly.
In the same sense, but this is a little different than a piano hinge because it doesn't have the same pin and barrel structure. And again, I'm trying not to get too caught up in the weeds, but this is more of a geared function.
Exactly.
And so it's got those teeth that are working in conjunction with each other, as well as the distribution of the weight.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
It's interesting, and I know sometimes it's hard to contextualize, especially with a small chunk like this, but I think you brought up a very interesting point. On a typical door structure, if it has pivots, depending on the height of the door, again, there's probably a bottom and a top, and all of that weight is typically sitting on that bottom pivot. So over time, that continues to wear and wear and wear. So something like this does tweak that. What are some pure signs? I mean, you talked about swelling, you talked about the different temperatures affecting that. What are some clear signs that we've probably got a problem, and maybe I don't really even recognize that my door isn't latching, but what are some signs that you're going to run into?
Sure, yeah. One of the most common things I see when I go on site, basically if you're seeing any type of contact that the door is making with the frame, that's going to be the telltale sign. That's going to be the first sign of that, because that means that the door's starting to fluctuate inside its frame. Because the door is a rectangle shape that's got to fit inside that rectangle opening. And when you see that door's making contact with that frame, it's the first step in seeing that you're going to have an issue.
I've never really thought of it in that way, but that's really a good thing. You could typically look on the edge of the door, right, at the top, and you're probably going to see either some rub marks, or if it's painted, it probably doesn't have paint on it anymore.
Exactly.
It's the one section that doesn't have paint, or if it's finished with some type of a stain or something, it's probably starting to wear down. But conversely, inside the frame at the top, you would probably see some rub marks as well.
Yep, and exactly. And on the other side of that as well, another thing to take into account, if you look at the door from the exterior side and you see the gap on the hinge side, you may have a large gap at the top and a very, very small gap at the bottom. That means that door is no longer sitting straight flush in that frame.
So it's a really great points. When a door is sitting in the frame the correct way, there's typically an equal amount of gap around the entire door. On all sides. When it starts to fall a little bit, obviously the gap gets a little bigger at the top on the hinge side, and it's going to be tighter on the latching side, and that whole door is kind of shifting over a little bit in that particular situation. Very cool.
Exactly.
So you can look for those types of rub marks on the outside or edge of the door, checking if sometimes I would imagine you would probably see the door that it just kind of closes, but just not all the way, just right on the edge of closing.
Yep.
What are some other signs that they could be looking for?
Any other signs that they could be looking for would be basically, like I said, with that heat. As the door swells, you may not have problems in the wintertime because the door isn't swelling. When you introduce that heat of the summertime, basically you might see, you might have some of that rubbing start happening. That door's getting bigger inside that opening, and the opening staying the same size.
And a lot of this is going to determine your climate of the area of the country that you're in. But a lot of times when spring starts to come, you're going to get a couple of warm days, and it's going to swell up. That sun is heating it up, and then the next day it's cold in the morning, so you get a lot of intermittent issues, right?
Yep, exactly.
It was working fine yesterday, and now it's not. Very cool. Well, good information here. So just some takeaways. You may see some rubbing on the door, but if the door is not particularly latching or closing all the way, maybe something to start looking at. You can also, I would imagine, see, because of that kind of pivot grind, you might see some metal shavings or something like that on the ground, or start to see some weird grease marks on the door. Yeah,
actually I've seen some instances where that bottom pivot actually completely gives out, and the door is actually moving inside the frame.
Yep, another big sign. Well, very cool. Thank you for sharing that information. Some things that customers are running into on a regular basis. The door's not latching, and I need to get it secured. So come help me out and see what we can figure out. We would invite you to connect with us by checking out the information on our website here, or by giving us a call. We'd love to help you out and support you in any way possible. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.